Media fact-checker. Former AFL player Nick Stevens convicted of fraud in pool installation scheme. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nick Stevens was found guilty on 12 counts of obtaining a financial advantage by deception and one charge of using a false document in the County Court of Victoria, ABC, News Kamau. Stevens was remanded in custody until his plea hearing on May 21, 2024, ABC, News Kamau. The case involved 6 families in Mildura, Victoria, who were defrauded of a total of $170,000 to $171,000 for pools they never received or had illegally installed, ABC, News Kamau. Stevens pleaded not guilty to all 14 fraud-related charges, ABC, News Kamau. Judge Fiona Todd denied an extension of Stevens' bail, stating she was unconvinced he should remain on bail, ABC, News Kamau. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Stevens was 45 years old at the time of the trial, while News Kamau states he was 46, ABC versus News Kamau. ABC mentions Stevens had financial difficulty towards the end of 2017, while News Kamau states he had stopped working on projects by early 2018, ABC versus News Kamau. ABC reports Stevens' defense argued he tried to fix them after realizing he couldn't complete the jobs, while News Kamau does not include this specific phrasing, ABC versus News Kamau. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. American journalist Shelly Kittleson kidnapped in Baghdad by Iranian-backed militia group. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Shelly Kittleson, a 49-year-old American journalist based in Rome, was kidnapped in Baghdad on Tuesday. Kittleson had written for Al-Monitor and had been warned by the U.S. State Department about threats prior to the abduction. An arrested suspect has ties to the Iran-backed Kataib Hezbollah militia group. Iraqi authorities intercepted a vehicle linked to the kidnappers that overturned during a car chase, arresting one suspect. Kittleson was last seen near the Baghdad hotel, close to the Green Zone, and was bundled into a car by armed men. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian mention the arrested suspect has ties to Kataib Hezbollah, but Newscoma does not specify the militia group. ABC and Guardian state the arrested suspect was taken into custody after a car chase, but Newscoma does not mention the chase or arrest details. Newscoma reports the vehicle was intercepted but says Kittleson was not in it, while ABC and Guardian imply she was not in the vehicle but do not explicitly state this. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NRL legend Nathan Merritt's cancer diagnosis and South Sydney's Legacy Bell appearance. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nathan Merritt has stage 4 cancer affecting his liver and esophagus. Merritt has been given approximately 12 months to live by doctors. Merritt will ring the legacy bell for South Sydney against the Bulldogs on Good Friday at Accor Stadium. Merritt scored 154 career tries, including 135 for South Sydney, SMH, 135, News Kamau, 146, corrected to 135 as per SMH's precise figure. Merritt underwent 2 rounds of chemotherapy and will start a third at the end of next month. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH reports Merritt scored 135 tries for South Sydney, while News Kamau states 146 tries. SMH states Merritt lost 20 kilograms, from 105 kilograms to 85 kilograms, but News Kamau does not specify the weight loss figure. SMH mentions Merritt's last attended game was the Indigenous round at Homebush in 2024, while News Kamau does not reference this detail. This story was covered by news.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israeli death penalty law for Palestinians sparks UN and international condemnation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Israeli Knesset passed a law on Monday allowing the death penalty for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank convicted of deadly terror attacks by military courts, with executions to occur within 90 days of sentencing. The UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, called the law patently inconsistent with Israel's international law obligations and stated its discriminatory application to Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory would constitute a war crime. The law makes the death penalty the default punishment for Palestinians in the West Bank found guilty of intentionally carrying out deadly attacks deemed acts of terrorism by a military court. Israel has rarely used the death penalty, with the last execution being Adolf Eichmann in 1962. The legislation permits military courts in the occupied West Bank to hand down death sentences, with a simple majority decision required instead of unanimity. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the law would apply to Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory and constitute a war crime, while ABC does not explicitly state this as a UN claim but focuses on the discriminatory nature. The Guardian mentions the law would apply to Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, while ABC only specifies the West Bank. The Guardian highlights the law's potential to institutionalize apartheid, while ABC does not explicitly use the term apartheid in its summary of Turk's warnings. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government investigates social media platforms for under-16s ban compliance failures. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube are under investigation by Australia's e-Safety Commissioner for potential non-compliance with the under-16 social media ban, announced on or before February 2025. The e-Safety Commissioner's compliance update was scheduled for release on Tuesday, February 2025, detailing alleged failures by platforms to enforce age restrictions. Platforms are accused of allowing underage users to repeatedly attempt age assurance tests until they pass, per reports from ABC, Guardian, News Corp Australia, and SBS. More than 4.7 million accounts were deactivated in the first 2 days after the ban took effect on December 10, 2024, according to ABC and News Corp Australia. Fines of up to $49.5 million AUD can be imposed on platforms for systemic failures to comply with the ban, as stated by ABC, Guardian, News Corp Australia, and SBS. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and News Corp Australia report that 4.7 million accounts were deactivated in the first 2 days, but the Guardian survey suggests 70% of pre-ban accounts remained active, implying fewer than 30% were actually removed. The Guardian states that 7 in 10 parents reported their children still had accounts on Facebook, 63.6%, but ABC and News Corp Australia do not provide parent survey data to contradict this figure directly. ABC mentions that platforms made meaningful attempts to remove underage users, while The Guardian and News Corp Australia describe these attempts as unacceptable or bare minimum. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Melbourne Storm forward Tui Kamikamica hospitalized after suspected stroke and subsequent discharge. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tui Kamikamica suffered a suspected stroke on Monday morning during a medical episode. Kamikamica was discharged from Royal Melbourne Hospital to commence inpatient rehabilitation, Article 1, and is currently in hospital receiving treatment, Articles 2 and 3. Kamikamica played 25 minutes for the Melbourne Storm in their 28-24 loss to North Queensland Cowboys in Townsville on Saturday, Articles 1 and 2. Kamikamica has made 142 appearances for the Melbourne Storm since his NRL debut in 2017. Kamikamica is a Fiji international and captains the Fiji National Rugby League team. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Kamikamica has been discharged from hospital to commence inpatient rehabilitation, while Articles 2 and 3 state he is currently in hospital receiving treatment. Article 1 mentions the Storm face the Panthers in Sydney tomorrow night, while articles 2 and 3 mention the match is on Friday night. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Man charged with murdering a sex worker at Melbourne brothel in 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Michael James Chalmers, 36, is accused of murdering Leah Jong, known as Yuko, a 62-year-old sex worker, at the Rainbow Garden brothel on Cowper Street, Footscray, in November 2024. Chalmers was remanded in custody and pleaded not guilty to murder at a Melbourne Magistrates Court committal hearing on April 2025. Security camera footage allegedly shows Chalmers grabbing Leah Jong in a headlock, violently forcing her onto a bed, and leaving her motionless after 31 minutes in a bedroom. Leah Jong's body was discovered several days after the alleged attack, on November 29, 2024, at the brothel. Magistrate Vincenzo Caltabiano committed Chalmers to stand trial for murder in the Supreme Court but dismissed charges of rape and constructive murder due to insufficient evidence. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Leah Jong's body was discovered several days after she was allegedly murdered in November 2024, while News Kamau states her body was found on November 29, 2024, after the alleged attack on November 27, 2024. No contradiction in dates, but ABC omits the exact date. ABC does not mention Chalmers' alleged online searches for brothels near me, which News Kamau includes as part of the prosecution's case. ABC states the magistrate dismissed charges of rape and unintentional killing in the furtherance of a crime of violence, while News Kamau refers to the dismissed charge as constructive murder. Both terms are legally synonymous, so no contradiction. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government threatens gas export controls to prevent winter supply shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Resources Minister Madeleine King issued a notice of intent under the Australian Domestic Gas Security Mechanism, ADGSM, on date not specified, to gas producers, warning of potential export controls if domestic supply is insufficient for winter 2024. The ACCC forecast a potential gas shortfall of up to 12 petajoules for July to September 2024, enough to power 76,000 homes during that period. Gas producers have 30 days to respond to the government's notice, after which the government can apply export controls by mid-May 2024. The heads of agreement ensuring sufficient gas for local use expired at the start of 2024, and no new agreement has been reached between the government and the sector. Madeleine King stated the notice is a precautionary measure and that Australia's domestic gas supply is currently secure, but the government is prepared to intervene if risks emerge. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the government is exploring a new tax on gas and thermal coal exports ahead of the federal budget, but News Kamau does not mention this. ABC reports that the ACCC chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb warned higher international gas prices may incentivize higher exports from Australia, while News Kamau does not include this specific warning. ABC highlights that the energy sector has bridled at the crossbenchers' push for a 25% windfall tax on gas exports, but News Kamau does not reference this opposition or the windfall tax proposal. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. North Korea's cyber espionage and fraud operation targeting Australian firms via fake IT jobs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. North Korea's regime is using thousands of undercover operatives posing as remote IT workers to infiltrate Western companies, with a focus on Australia and the US. The UN estimates North Korea's annual revenue from this operation is approximately $800 million. ASIO, Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, has identified North Korean operatives targeting Australian firms to funnel salaries back to Pyongyang. Major Australian banks, including NAB, have been infiltrated by North Korean agents, with at least one agent discovered and subsequently sacked. The FBI in the US has identified North Korean laptop farms where agents use fake identities to work for multiple Western firms simultaneously, with one case involving over 300 US firms. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources as they contain identical text and reporting. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US directs embassies to counter foreign disinformation using X and military psychological ops. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The US State Department issued a cable signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio on March 29 directing all American embassies and consulates worldwide to launch coordinated campaigns against foreign propaganda. The cable instructs embassies to work alongside the US military's Psychological Operations Unit, MISO, formerly PSYOP, to counter disinformation. The cable endorses Elon Musk's X, Twitter, platform, specifically its Community Notes feature, as an innovative and crowdsourced tool to combat anti-American propaganda without compromising free speech or privacy. The directive highlights coordinated foreign efforts, including from Iran, Russia, and China, to undermine US interests through disinformation campaigns targeting allies in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The cable outlines 5 broad goals: countering hostile messaging, expanding information access, exposing adversary behavior, elevating pro-US local voices, and promoting telling America's story. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two Guardian articles. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Court denies suppression order on Bondi attackers' family identities. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Naved Akram is charged with 15 counts of murder, 40 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of committing a terrorist act related to the Bondi attack, ABC, News Kamau, Guardian. Akram's father, Sajid Akram, 50, was shot dead by police during the December 14 attack, ABC, News Kamau, Guardian. The attack occurred at a Chinooka by the Sea event at Bondi Beach on December 14, killing 15 people, ABC, News Kamau, Guardian. A photograph of Naved Akram's driver's license, including his address, was posted on social media shortly after the shooting, ABC, News Kamau, Guardian. Judge Hugh Donnelly dismissed a 40-year suppression order request for Akram's mother, brother, and sister's identities and addresses, ABC, News Kamau, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the family's brother received death threats via phone messages, but News Kamau and Guardian do not specify this detail. News Kamau mentions a yellow liquid, suspected urine, was thrown at the family's yard, while ABC and Guardian do not mention this specific incident. ABC and Guardian note Akram's mother gave an interview to the Sydney Morning Herald, but News Kamau only mentions 9, not the Sydney Morning Herald. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Western Australia faces severe mouse plague threatening agriculture and communities. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. CSIRO Research Officer Steve Henry is warning about unprecedented mouse plague levels in Western Australia's grain paddocks, ABC, News Kamau. Mouse numbers in Western Australian paddocks exceed 200 to 300 per hectare, with some areas reporting up to 8,000 per hectare, ABC, 200 to 300, News Kamau, 8,000. Farmers in WA's Midwest, Wheatbelt, and Goldfields Esperance regions are reporting mouse infestations, News Kamau. Mice are damaging freshly sown seeds, particularly in canola crops, causing significant yield losses, ABC, News Kamau. Steve Henry visited WA in 2022 and noted this year's mouse numbers are worse than previous outbreaks, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports mice numbers exceeding 200 to 300 per hectare as cause for concern, while Newskamau states some paddocks have up to 8,000 mice per hectare. ABC does not mention a federal exemption requirement for high-strength bait, but Newskamau states farmers need one for ZP50. Newskamau claims farmers found 4,000 burrows per hectare, while ABC does not reference burrow counts specifically. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker: Australia's Easter weather and potential severe tropical cyclone in Coral Sea. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A high-pressure system is currently centered south of Western Australia and will move east toward the Tasman Sea, bringing settled weather to most of the country over Easter. Another severe tropical cyclone, named 37U, is expected to develop in the Coral Sea around mid-next week, with a potential track toward the Queensland coast. The Bureau of Meteorology predicts System 37U will deepen and strengthen over the weekend, with a high chance of becoming a cyclone by Sunday when it is over the northern Coral Sea. Sydney is forecast to experience showers from Good Friday through Easter Sunday, with a break on Easter Monday, and maximum temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Brisbane will see temperatures in the high 20s and a chance of rain for the first 3 days of Easter, with windy conditions along the Queensland coast. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the hottest Easter temperatures will reach around 40 degrees Celsius in the Pilbara and Kimberley, while The Guardian does not mention specific temperature extremes beyond general forecasts. ABC mentions a 50 to 60% chance of precipitation in Brisbane from Friday to Sunday, with a 4-day total likely below 10 millimeters, while The Guardian states Brisbane will have a chance of rain for the first 3 days without specifying totals. ABC reports that Perth's maximums will drop from 28 degrees Celsius on Friday to 23 to 25 degrees Celsius between Saturday and Monday, while The Guardian only mentions temperatures in the mid to high 20s without specifying the exact drop. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker: Sydney gym shooting, 3 men charged in daylight assault with firearms. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A shooting occurred outside a gym on Steer Road, Gregory Hills, Sydney's southwest at 8:30 a.m. on December 5, 2025. 2 masked men fired 12 shots at a 48-year-old man outside the gym. He escaped uninjured. The shooters fled in a red Range Rover SUV with cloned number plates, which was found abandoned in bushland near Macquarie Grove Road, Cobbitty. Police recovered clothing, masks, cloned number plates, and 2 pistols from the bushland near the ditched vehicle. A 40-year-old man was charged with shooting with intent to murder and knowingly directing a criminal group. He was arrested at a Parramatta property on December 5, 2025. But not all outlets told the same story. Newskamau does not mention the target's name or criminal gang connections, while ABC names him as Stephen Halliby with links to the True Kings gang. Newskamau does not specify the exact charges for the 32-year-old beyond acquiring a pistol while under a firearms prohibition order, while ABC lists additional charges including participation in a criminal group. Newskamau does not mention the 38-year-old's full charge list, while ABC includes contribute criminal activity as a charge. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker: NASA's Artemis II mission, first crewed lunar flyby in 53 years. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Artemis II launched on November 16, 2024, or equivalent date in articles, marking the first crewed lunar mission since Apollo 17 in December 1972. The mission carries 4 astronauts: Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Koch, and mission specialist Jeremy Hansen, Canadian Space Agency. The crew includes the first woman, Christina Koch, first person of color, Victor Glover, and first non-American, Jeremy Hansen, to travel beyond low Earth orbit. The Space Launch System (SLS) rocket and Orion capsule stack stands at 322 feet, 98 meters, tall, slightly taller than the Statue of Liberty, 305 feet. The translunar injection burn occurred approximately 26 hours after launch, lasting less than 6 minutes, propelling the crew toward the moon. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 3, ABC, states the launch was expected on Wednesday afternoon local time, early Thursday morning AEST, while Article 1, Guardian, and Article 4, ABC, specify the launch was on Wednesday at 6:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11:24 p.m. British Summer Time. Article 2, ABC, mentions the translunar injection burn occurred this morning after 26 hours, but no specific time is given, while Article 6, Guardian, and Article 7, Guardian, clarify it happened on the second day of the mission, around 26 hours post-launch. Article 1, Guardian, and Article 8, Guardian, mention the launch was originally scheduled for February 2024, but Article 3, ABC, states the launch was delayed due to issues in February, with the current launch window being the first 6 days of April, which seems inconsistent with the actual launch date in other articles. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Angus Taylor's car theft and related political events during fuel crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Angus Taylor's car was stolen on March 27 from an address in Canberra's inner south. The stolen vehicle was located in Turner, a North Canberra suburb, later the same day. ACT Policing confirmed the car was taken to an ACT policing facility for forensic examination. The theft occurred just hours before Taylor's planned joint press conference with Matt Canavan and Bridget McKenzie at a petrol station. Taylor's office declined to comment on the car theft. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH states Taylor's car was left running into the red with no fuel, but Newscomow does not mention this detail. SMH implies the car theft was the reason for Taylor's shirtless appearance, while Newscomow does not address this motive. SMH reports the car was likely not driven far due to low fuel, but Newscomow does not confirm this reasoning. This story was covered by news.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. California sheriffs disputed ballot seizures and voter fraud investigation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chad Bianco, Riverside County Sheriff and Republican gubernatorial candidate, seized 650,000 ballots from the November 2023 special election on Proposition 50. Bianco ordered the seizure of an additional 426 boxes of ballot materials earlier this week as part of a criminal investigation into alleged voter fraud. The Riverside Election Integrity Team claimed a discrepancy of 45,896 votes between official results and handwritten counts, while state officials confirmed the actual difference was only 103 votes. Rob Bonta, California's Democratic Attorney General, filed a lawsuit against Bianco, accusing him of obtaining facial insufficient evidence for search warrants and violating his directives to halt the investigation. Shirley Weber, California's Secretary of State, condemned Bianco's actions as based on allegations that lack credible evidence and risking public confidence in elections. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Bianco willfully violated Bonta's directives, while Article 2 implies Bianco halted his investigation due to external pressure rather than defiance. Article 1 claims Bianco's actions are unprecedented in state history, but Article 2 does not explicitly confirm this as a consensus fact. Article 1 attributes a quote to Bonta saying there is no indication, anywhere in the United States, of widespread voter fraud, while Article 2 omits this exact phrasing. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal judge dismisses most of Blake Lively's sexual harassment claims against Justin Baldoni in It Ends With Us case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Federal Judge Lewis Lyman dismissed 10 of Blake Lively's 13 claims against Justin Baldoni in a lawsuit filed in December 2023. Only 3 claims remain, breach of contract, retaliation, and aiding and abetting in retaliation. Judge Lyman ruled Lively was an independent contractor, not an employee, so her sexual harassment claims under Title VII were invalid. The trial is scheduled to begin on May 18, 2025, in Manhattan's U.S. District Court. Justin Baldoni directed and co-starred in the 2024 film It Ends With Us*, which grossed over $350 million worldwide. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Lively's emotional distress claims were dismissed in June 2024, but ABC does not mention this timeline explicitly. The Guardian states Lively's texts to Swift were unsealed, while ABC does not specify their legal status. ABC describes the film's debut as $50 million US, while The Guardian states it grossed over $350 million, no currency specified. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fatal plane crash in Queensland after pilot hits tree near Normanton Airport. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A solo pilot, Thomas Knight, 32, died in a plane crash on February 6, 2026, near Normanton Airport, Queensland. The aircraft was a MacJet International Beechcraft King Air B200 twin turboprop. The plane struck a tree approximately 360 to 580 meters beyond the runway's end after a rapid descent post-takeoff. The aircraft impacted the ground in a wings-level attitude, slid beneath power lines, yawed right, and broke up before crashing into floodwaters. The pilot had previously ferried 4 passengers from Cairns to Doomadgee and back to Normanton earlier that day. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the aircraft climbed to 46 meters, 150 feet, above ground level, while Newscomer reports 150 feet, 46 meters, as the maximum altitude. Both sources use the same numbers, but ABC's phrasing implies a lower climb than NEWSCOMEU's framing. ABC reports the crash occurred 800 meters west of Normanton Airport, while Newscomer does not specify the exact distance but describes it as less than a kilometer from the runway. No direct numerical contradiction but a slight discrepancy in phrasing. Newscomer explicitly names the pilot as Thomas Knight, while ABC does not mention his first name in the provided text. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's escalating tensions with NATO allies over Iran war and Australia's response. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to withdraw the US from NATO after allies refused military support for Israel's war with Iran. Australia and the UK denied the US military access to their airspace and refused to commit naval assets to the conflict. Trump accused non-participating countries to go get your own oil by force from the Gulf. Anthony Albanese, Australian PM, avoided direct criticism of Trump's war conduct in a national address. Keir Starmer, UK PM, opposed the war but granted Trump some demands despite opposition. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 claims Trump is absolutely considering withdrawing the US from NATO, while Article 2 does not explicitly state this as a confirmed threat. Article 1 describes Trump's war as illegal and absurd, while Article 2 avoids labeling it illegal but calls it a global catastrophe. Article 1 frames Albanese's response as marginally more strident and vague, while Article 2 calls it right to avoid Trump's global catastrophe. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fair Work Commission abolishes discounted pay rates for young Australian workers aged 18 to 20 in retail, fast food, and pharmacies. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Fair Work Commission abolished junior pay rates for workers aged 18 to 20 in retail, fast food, and pharmacy sectors. Around 500,000 workers are estimated to be eligible for the pay rise, according to ABS data. Junior pay rates previously paid 18-year-olds 70% of the award rate, 19-year-olds 80%, and 20-year-olds 90%. The changes apply to the General Retail Industry Award, Fast Food Industry Award, and Pharmacy Industry Award. The wage adjustments will be phased in over up to 4 years, with the first changes starting in December 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the sources regarding factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Magnitude 7.4 earthquake in Indonesia triggers tsunami warnings across Asia-Pacific. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck the northern Molucca Sea region, Indonesia, at 9:48 a.m. AEDST, local time, on Thursday, with an epicenter 127 kilometers west-northwest of Ternate, Indonesia, and a depth of 35 kilometers. The U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, initially recorded the quake at magnitude 7.4, later confirmed, with aftershocks reaching up to magnitude 5 according to the USGS and Indonesia's BMKG. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued warnings of possible tsunami waves, 0.3 m to 1 m above tide level, along Indonesian coastlines within 1,000 kilometers of the epicenter, affecting Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia. Japan's meteorological agency stated there was no expected tsunami damage to Japan, though slight sea level changes might occur, and Australia's Bureau of Meteorology confirmed no tsunami threat to Australia. The earthquake occurred in the Molucca Sea, an area frequently hit by moderate to large earthquakes, with 9 magnitude 7+ quakes recorded within 250 kilometers in the past 50 years, USGS. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian initially reported the quake's magnitude as 7.8, later corrected to 7.4, while Newscamau and ABC only reported 7.4 from the start. The Guardian's AFP journalist in Manado reported no significant damage, while ABC's Metro TV reported 1 death from falling rubble in Manado. The Guardian mentioned waves of less than 30 centimeters for Guam, Japan, Malaysia, etc., but ABC's Japan Meteorological Agency warning was framed as a potential tsunami in the Pacific, not just minor waves. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Jannik Sinner and Aryna Sabalenka complete sunshine doubles at Miami Open 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jannik Sinner won the Miami Open title in a 6-4, 6-4 final against Jiri Lehecka on March 2024. Sinner completed the sunshine double by winning both Indian Wells and Miami Open titles consecutively. Sinner has won 34 consecutive sets at Masters 1000 level dating back to his Paris 2023 win. Sinner defeated Alexander Zverev in the Miami Open semifinals with a 6-3, 7-6, 4 score. Aryna Sabalenka won the Miami Open title the day before Sinner, also completing the sunshine double. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Sabalenka lost match points to Rybakina in the Australian Open final, but Article 3 does not mention this detail. Article 2 claims Lehecka won every service game in Miami, a feat by only 8 men, while Article 1 does not mention this specific statistic. Article 1 describes Sinner's 2024 start as rare moments of tension with losses to Djokovic and Mensik, while Article 2 calls them far from ideal and one of his poorest performances of the last few years respectively. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory records 3 deaths in custody within a week, including 2 recent incidents and a fatal stabbing in Katherine. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 26-year-old man died at Darwin Correctional Centre on Sunday morning, 7:50 a.m., after being found unresponsive in his cell. Medical assistance was provided but he was declared deceased at the scene. The death at Darwin Correctional Centre is not believed to be suspicious according to NT police statements. A 25-year-old man died in police custody in Darwin's northern suburbs on Tuesday evening after being arrested for an assault at Tui Gardens retirement village and placed in the rear cage of a police vehicle. The 25-year-old man began experiencing labored breathing shortly after being placed in the police vehicle. St. John Ambulance and police performed CPR before he was taken to Royal Darwin Hospital and later declared deceased at 10:10 p.m. The NT Major Crime Unit and Professional Standards Command are investigating the 25-year-old man's death, with oversight from the coroner. But not all outlets told the same story. News Corp reports a third death in custody, 19-year-old in Catherine, within a week, but Guardian and ABC only confirm 2 deaths, 26-year-old and 25-year-old. News Corp states the 19-year-old victim had serious stab wounds to his upper body, while ABC does not specify the wound location beyond serious stab wound. News Corp mentions the driver arrested in Catherine was a 19-year-old man, while ABC refers to him as a 19-year-old without specifying gender. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian aid worker Zomi Francom's death in Gaza and Israel's investigation 2 years later. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lalzomi Zomi Francom, 43, and 6 World Central Kitchen colleagues were killed in an Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, strike on their humanitarian aid convoy in Gaza on April 1, 2024. An Australian review by Mark Binskin, former defense chief, found a significant breakdown in situational awareness and serious failures in IDF practices, concluding the attack was not intentional but due to procedural errors. Israel's military advocate general is conducting an investigation into the strike, which remains ongoing as of April 2026, with no final conclusions or public findings released. 2 IDF officers were dismissed and 3 others reprimanded over the strike, which violated IDF rules of engagement. The Francom family has not received a personal apology or compensation from Israel, nor has the audio of the drone strike footage been released to them. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Israel's ambassador Hillel Newman claimed the number of journalists killed in Gaza, e.g., 250 plus, was exaggerated, while ABC and The Guardian's own reporting site CPJ's verified figure of 86 journalists killed by Israeli fire in 2025 alone. The Guardian's Newman says the drone footage audio access was unprecedented for Binskin, but Binskin's report explicitly states he was never given access to the audio. ABC states the Francom family has never received a personal apology or compensation, while The Guardian's Newman only mentions sympathy was expressed, not a formal apology. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arsenal's 3-1 WSL win over Tottenham featuring Alessia Russo's hat-trick and league implications. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Arsenal defeated Tottenham 3-1 in the Women's Super League at the Emirates Stadium on Saturday. Alessia Russo scored a hat-trick in the first 27 minutes for Arsenal, including goals at 4 foot, 11, and 19, or 22 in Article 1. Tottenham conceded 2 goals in the opening 10 minutes, including a Frida Lenhardsson Marnham own goal at 29 foot, Article 1, or 22, Article 2. Arsenal's 25th and 26th goal contributions came from Russo in 31 games, placing her 4th in WSL scoring charts. Renee Sledgers praised Russo as a complete footballer and one of the best finishers she's seen. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Russo's hat-trick took 22 minutes, while Article 2 states it took 27 minutes, with goals at 4, 11, and 19. Article 1 reports Marnham's own goal at 29 minutes, but Article 2 reports it at 22 minutes. Article 1 lists Russo's hat-trick goals as a header from McCabe's corner, a low drive past Kopp, and a penalty area finish, while Article 2 describes the 11 goal as a classy finish after walking past Kopp. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian political reaction to US-Iran war and economic fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie, Liberal MP, criticized US President Donald Trump's huge miscalculation in the Iran war as of early March 2024. Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, impacting global fuel supply chains and Australian fuel exports. Andrew Hastie stated Australia is dependent on the export of fuel in and out of the Middle East due to its location. The Australian government announced it would underwrite additional fuel cargo deliveries to address supply shortages, March 2024. Andrew Hastie served as a Special Forces veteran and fought in the Middle East alongside US forces. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Hastie may be open to a gas export levy despite coalition opposition, while Newscomm does not mention this proposal. ABC states Employment Minister Amanda Rishworth explicitly said work-from-home measures are not being considered for fuel shortages, but Newscomm omits this detail. ABC notes Hastie described Trump's criticism of Australia's warship refusal as petulant, February 2024, while Newscomm does not reference this. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Barbie Dreamfest event backlash over poor execution and misleading marketing. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The event was called Barbie Dreamfest and took place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, over a weekend in 2024. Tickets ranged from $69 ABC, $US $69 100, to $449 ABC, US $449 655, or $452.50, Guardian, pound $54.72 to pound $54 452.50, for the Dream Pass. The event was organized by Mischief Management, which licensed the Barbie brand from Mattel. Attendees reported receiving a swag bag with only a plastic hairbrush and Barbie-themed hand sanitizer, described as dollar store quality. The life-sized Barbie Dreamhouse was criticized as a cheap backdrop with a picnic table on some fake turf, both sources. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the Dream Pass was $449 US, $655, while The Guardian states it was $452.50, pound $54.72 for a one-day pass. ABC mentions Serena Williams and Angel Reese were in attendance as A-list speakers, but The Guardian does not reference them. ABC reports the roller rink was small and only big enough for kids, while The Guardian describes it as a 20x 40-foot square of concrete in the middle of the marketplace with no decorations. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. DNA evidence confirms Ted Bundy's link to 1974 Utah murder of Laura and Aim. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Laura and Aim, 17, went missing on Halloween night, October 31, 1974, after leaving a party alone to go to a convenience store in Utah. Her body was found about a month later, November-December 1974, on the side of a highway in American Fork Canyon, bound, beaten, and without clothing. Investigators long suspected Ted Bundy was responsible, as he verbally acknowledged culpability leading up to his 1989 execution. New DNA testing in 2024 definitively linked Bundy's DNA to evidence recovered from Aim's case. Bundy was studying law at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City at the time of Aim's killing. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention the specific canyon, American Fork Canyon, where the body was found, while ABC explicitly states this. ABC describes Bundy's DNA as a single male DNA profile extracted from mixed degraded samples, but The Guardian omits this technical detail. The Guardian does not reference the 1977 Aspen courthouse escape or Florida sorority house murders, while ABC includes these events in context. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Romanian nationals charged for stealing wallets from elderly Queensland shoppers via scam. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 3 Romanian nationals, 2 men aged 49 and 42, 1 woman aged 29, were arrested in 8 Mile Plains on the 28th of March, 2024 for allegedly targeting elderly victims, ages 70 to 94, at Queensland shopping centres. Victims were distracted by claims of dropped wallets while their cards were stolen for fraudulent use at ATMs or grocery payments. The scam occurred in shopping centres across Kenmore, Chermside, Strathpine, North Lakes, Buddina, Caloundra, and Laidley. Police seized approximately $20,000 from a unit complex in 8 Mile Plains during the arrests. The 49-year-old man and 29-year-old woman were charged with multiple counts of fraud, 5 and 8 respectively, stealing, 4 each, and enter with intent, 2 each, and refused bail. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland Rail industrial action disrupting train services in April 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. No trains operated between Darra and Rosewood, Ipswich Line, and Central and Cleveland on Wednesday, April 1st, due to industrial action. Queensland Rail warned commuters of disruptions on Wednesday, April 1st, and potential further disruptions on Thursday, April 2nd, due to industrial action. The Rail, Tram and Bus Union, RTBU, Queensland President Steph White stated train control members took low-impact industrial action for 24 hours starting 12 a.m. on April 1st, targeting coal and mineral trains, not passenger services. Queensland Rail confirmed about 300 services were cancelled on Wednesday, April 1st, on the Ipswich and Cleveland lines due to the dispute. Negotiations between Queensland Rail and unions, including RTBU and ETU, began in January 2024, covering approximately 5,600 rail workers. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Queensland Rail did not tell workers not to attend work, but RTBU President Steph White claims workers were prevented from working by government QR decision. ABC reports Queensland Rail advised members they would not be paid if not performing full duties, while ETU claims the government threatened workers with no pay for participating in minor actions. News Kamau claims the union intended to target only coal and freight operations, but ABC's Steph White says the government escalated the dispute by preventing workers from performing their jobs. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Formula 1 2026 Japanese Grand Prix qualifying and race setup at Suzuka Circuit. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kimi Antonelli qualified on pole position, 1 minute and 28.778 seconds, for the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, 0.298 seconds ahead of teammate George Russell. Mercedes locked out the front row for the third consecutive race in 2026 with Antonelli, pole, and Russell, second. Oscar Piastri qualified third for McLaren, 0.354 seconds behind Antonelli, while Charles Leclerc was fourth for Ferrari. Max Verstappen failed to qualify for Q3 and started 11th, describing his Red Bull car as undrivable during qualifying. Lando Norris qualified 5th for McLaren, while Lewis Hamilton was 6th for Ferrari. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention a 10-minute delay to the race start due to support race damage, while The Guardian reports this delay explicitly. ABC does not mention Verstappen refusing to start a press conference until the journalist left, while The Guardian reports this incident. ABC does not provide a detailed breakdown of Q1 eliminations or the specific times of drivers like Liam Lawson or Arvid Lindblad, which The Guardian includes. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Saudi Arabia's push for US to escalate military campaign against Iran amid regional war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, urged Donald Trump not to cut short the US-Israeli war on Iran, calling it a historic opportunity to remake the Middle East, both articles, Guardian. Saudi Arabia has not yet joined the war directly despite weighing military involvement, both articles, Guardian. Trump confirmed MBS's role in urging the US to continue the war, stating "Yeah, he's a warrior. He's fighting with us," both articles, Guardian. Iran launched a drone attack on Saudi Arabia's Yanbu oil refinery on the Red Sea coast, both articles, Guardian. Saudi Arabia and Iran have long been regional rivals, with Saudi Arabia claiming Sunni leadership and Iran Shia leadership, both articles, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 does not mention Saudi Arabia's 2023 detente with Iran, while Article 2 explicitly states Saudi Arabia hugged Iran close after US failure in 2019. Article 1 omits the UAE's public call for Iran's conclusive military defeat, Wall Street Journal quote in Article 2. Article 1 does not reference Saudi Arabia's potential defensive coalition support or retaliation against Houthi strikes, which Article 2 attributes to Saudi analysts. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Affordable flight options to Europe in 2026 amid Middle East instability. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A business-class return flight from Melbourne to London with Etihad in mid-April to early May costs $4,881, nearly $2,000 cheaper than Emirates Premium Economy for the same route and dates. Economy class fares to Europe via Asia-based carriers, e.g., Air China, Malaysia Airlines, Qantas, Turkish Airlines, are comparable to 2025 prices, with examples like Melbourne-London from $1,295, Air China, or Sydney-Paris from $2,167, Malaysia Airlines. Return business class fares with Qantas, Singapore Airlines, Japan Airlines, ANA, or Turkish Airlines start at $12,000 for any departure in the next 6 months. China-based carriers and Vietnam Airlines offer sub-$10,000 return business class fares to Europe. Flights via the US, e.g., American Airlines, United, are safer but more expensive, with return economy fares from Melbourne-Sydney to London starting at $2,600 in May and $4,000 in July. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources, as Thege is a direct replication of SMH's article with no deviations. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel supply crisis and government response amid Middle East conflict. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia currently holds 30 days worth of diesel, 39 days of petrol, and 30 days of jet fuel in reserve, ABC Article 1, ABC Article 2. All fuel shipments to Australia are secured through May 2024, ABC Article 1, ABC Article 2. Preliminary government modelling from mid-March assumed rationing would begin if fuel stockpiles dropped to 10 days, ABC Article 1, ABC Article 2. Voluntary fuel consumption measures would be introduced if stockpiles fell to 15 days, ABC Article 1, ABC Article 2. The federal government has passed legislation to underwrite future fuel shipments, covering price gaps for importers, ABC Article 1, ABC Article 2. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states preliminary modelling assumed rationing at 10 days of supply, while Article 2 states the PM&C document assumed rationing at 10 days but also included voluntary measures at 15 days, though both agree on the 10-day threshold for rationing. Article 1 quotes Treasurer Jim Chalmers as saying the government is working to avoid rationing, while Article 2 states the government is not considering rationing at this stage but has a 4-stage plan that includes rationing as a potential future measure. Article 1 mentions Queensland Treasurer David Janetsky's criticism of the federal government's GST plan, but Article 2 does not reference this conflict or state-level disagreements. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US Supreme Court hearing on Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump attended oral arguments at the US Supreme Court on February 21, 2024, making him the first sitting president to do so. The Supreme Court heard arguments over whether Trump's executive order could strip birthright citizenship from children born in the US to undocumented immigrants or temporary residents. The 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause, adopted in 1868, was affirmed by the Supreme Court in United States v. Wong Kim Ark 1898, as granting birthright citizenship to all persons born in the US. The Trump administration argues the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof" in the 14th Amendment excludes children of undocumented immigrants or those with temporary status. The ACLU and 24 Democratic state attorneys general filed lawsuits challenging Trump's executive order, calling it unconstitutional. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Trump administration's argument is a fringe conservative interpretation, while Article 2 describes it as a legal theory without explicitly calling it fringe. Article 1 does not mention Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's specific question about pregnant women depositions, which Article 2 includes. Article 1 does not reference the Trump administration's claim that other countries are selling citizenships to the US, which Article 2 quotes from Truth Social. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sam Kerr's potential transfer from Chelsea FC to Denver Summit in the NWSL. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Sam Kerr, 32, has been linked to a move from Chelsea FC to the NWSL's Denver Summit club. Network 10 reported Kerr has signed with Denver Summit after 6 seasons at Chelsea. Kerr's contract with Chelsea expires at the end of the 2023-24 Women's Super League season. Kerr posted on Snapchat, "Don't believe everything you read in the media, man. They know a decision before me." Denver Summit is an expansion club owned by US Winter Olympics gold medalist Mikaela Shiffrin and NFL great Peyton Manning. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC says Kerr had a goal assist in Chelsea's 1-0 win over Arsenal, but The Guardian does not mention this specific detail. The Guardian states Denver Summit's first match was a 0-0 draw on the 6th of April, 2024, while ABC does not specify the date but implies it was recent. ABC emphasizes Kerr's slow recovery with cameos off the bench, while The Guardian frames it as reduced role without quantifying frequency. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fuel crisis impacts Australian tourism and travel plans during Easter 2025. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Rising fuel prices due to Middle East conflict are causing cancellations and operational disruptions across Australia's tourism sector. Southern Queensland tourism operators, e.g., Paradise Resort, Noosa Quad Bike Tours, Drop Bear Adventures, report significant booking losses. Paradise Resort down 10%, Noosa Quad Bike Tours down 60%, Drop Bear Adventures lost $10,000 in cancellations. Federal government announced a cut to the fuel excise to mitigate costs, welcomed by operators like Darren Smith, Coastal Cruises Mululaba, and others. Tourism Research Australia data shows overnight visitor spending fell $2.3 billion nationally in 2025, with Queensland, $379 million, NSW, $410 million, and Victoria, $1.2 billion, hardest hit. Fuel prices in K'gari, Fraser Island, reached $4.25 per litre, among the highest in Queensland and Australia, per RACQ and ABC reports. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states K'gari fuel prices are the highest in Queensland and among the priciest in Australia, $4.25 per litre, while Article 2 does not specify regional price comparisons beyond national context. Article 1 reports some tourism sectors, e.g., North Stradbroke Island ferries, Gold Coast Airport, remain strong despite fuel concerns, but Article 2 does not mention these specific bright spots. Article 1 cites RACQ's Dr. Ian Jeffries as stating fuel availability is not an issue, while Article 2 does not reference RACQ's supply assessments directly. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israel's parliament approves death penalty for Palestinians convicted of lethal attacks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Israel's parliament passed legislation making the death penalty by hanging the default punishment for West Bank Palestinians convicted of nationalistic killings or acts of terror against Israelis, effective within 30 days, ABC, Guardian 1, Guardian 3. The law applies only to future cases and does not retroactively affect Palestinians convicted before its passage, ABC, Guardian 3. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's far-right national security minister, spearheaded the bill and wore a noose-shaped lapel pin during debates, ABC, Guardian 3. The Association of Civil Rights in Israel filed a petition challenging the law in Israel's highest court, calling it discriminatory by design, ABC. The UN and European nations, including Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, condemned the legislation, warning it violates international law and human rights norms, Guardian 3, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian 1 claims the law is part of a long-standing policy of lethal force against Palestinians, while ABC and Guardian 3 focus on it as a new legislative measure without historical context. Guardian 1 describes the law as a new phase in Israel's dehumanization of Palestinians, but ABC and Guardian 3 present it as a long-sought demand by the far-right without framing it as escalating systemic oppression. Guardian 1 argues the law is a direct extension of Israel's existing system of torture and abuse, while ABC and Guardian 3 emphasize its discriminatory application to Palestinians in the West Bank versus Israeli citizens. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian government expands device ban in schools to include smartwatches, headphones, and all school types. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Victorian public and private, including Catholic, schools will ban internet-enabled smartwatches and wireless headphones from Term 1 2027. Mobile phones have been banned in Victorian public schools since 2020, with the policy expanded to all schools starting January 27, 2027. Smartwatches with notifications, internet connection, or recording functions will be restricted during school hours. Education Minister Ben Carroll stated the phone ban led to increased student focus, improved socialization, and fewer device-related incidents. Independent review found students were more focused in class and more social during breaks after the phone ban. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC notes mixed parental views on the ban's effectiveness, while Thij and Newscamau only mention support or neutral reactions without highlighting dissent. Thij reports a 20% increase in students believing rules were enforced fairly at Caroline Chisholm Catholic College, but this specific statistic is not mentioned in ABC or Newscamau. ABC states Parents Victoria supports reducing distractions but also advocates for student-led consultation, while Thij and Newscamau do not mention this consultation aspect. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teenage assault on paramedic after stolen car crash in Melbourne. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 teenage males were travelling in a stolen Mazda 3 that collided with a Volkswagen Jetta at Nicholson St and Victoria Parade, Carlton, just before 6 a.m. on Saturday. 2 teenagers fled the scene immediately after the crash. A 19-year-old male and a 15-year-old male were injured in the crash, with the 19-year-old suffering serious injuries. The 15-year-old allegedly assaulted a paramedic during transport to hospital, requiring treatment for the paramedic's injuries. A 66-year-old man and 76-year-old woman from Terang were in the Volkswagen and taken to hospital as a precaution. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states 2 teenagers are in police custody, but Newskamau does not mention any teens in custody. ABC specifies the 19-year-old was seriously injured and the 15-year-old had minor injuries, while Newskamau only states both were injured without severity details. ABC explicitly names the Volkswagen model as a Jetta, but Newskamau does not mention the model. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Asia-Pacific jet fuel supply crisis threatens Australia's aviation industry due to Middle East conflict. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia imports roughly 25% of its refined fuel from South Korea, including 18% of its total jet fuel imports, Guardian, ABC. China supplies about a third of Australia's jet fuel and has reportedly restricted jet fuel exports, Guardian, ABC. South Korea refines Middle Eastern crude oil into petroleum products for export, making it a key fuel supplier to Australia, Guardian, ABC. Australia relies on foreign jet fuel for about 80% of its annual consumption, 10 billion litres, Guardian, ABC. South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources has not received any request to redirect jet fuel exports for domestic use, Guardian, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports South Korean airlines, unnamed, have asked the government to redirect jet fuel exports domestically, while ABC states South Korea is capping jet fuel exports at last year's level but has not received any such request. The Guardian states China has already moved to restrict fuel exports, while ABC reports China usually exports 2 million tons monthly but expects this to drop to 1 million tons in May without explicitly stating a current restriction. The Guardian mentions China's jet fuel supplies are assured until late April or early May, Chris Bowen, but ABC does not provide a specific timeline for Chinese supply assurances. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Western Australia invokes emergency fuel supply powers amid regional shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. WA Premier Roger Cook activated emergency powers under the Fuel, Energy and Power Resources Act 1972 to force fuel suppliers to disclose supply chain details. 3 of the 6 major fuel suppliers initially refused to provide sensitive information, stock levels, incoming shipments, delivery timetables, when requested by the WA government. The emergency powers allow WA to comply with the Commonwealth's Keep Australia Moving, Level 2, National Fuel Plan. Energy Minister Amberjade Sanderson stated penalties for non-compliance could reach $100,000 per day for corporations and $10,000 per day for individuals. The government seeks transparency on fuel volumes, distribution points, and frequency of distribution to regional WA, agricultural and mining sectors. But not all outlets told the same story. Newskamau states the emergency powers are very specific and completely different from COVID-19 measures, while ABC clarifies the 1972 Act is distinct from the broader COVID-19 Emergency Management Act, though both sources agree they are not a full state of emergency. Newskamau does not mention the $100,000 per day penalty for corporations, which is explicitly stated in ABC and SBS, though SBS is less detailed. Newskamau does not reference the 1,600% stockpiling case in Goldfields Esperance, highlighted only in ABC. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Private health insurance premium hikes in Australia and their economic impact. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Private health insurance premiums in Australia will rise by an industry average of 4.41% from April 1, 2026, marking the largest increase in nearly a decade. For-profit insurers like AIA Health Insurance, 5.98%, NIB, 5.47%, Medibank, 5.1%, and Bupa, 4.8%, are leading the increases, while not-for-profit funds such as GMHBA are raising rates by 1.98%. Gold-tier hospital cover premiums will increase by an average of 13.3%, with HCF's Hospital Optimal Gold cover rising by 25%, adding roughly $167 per year for singles and $330 per year for families. Insurers attribute the hikes to rising hospital wages, more expensive medical technology, an aging population, and increased demand for mental health and chronic disease services post-pandemic. The Reserve Bank of Australia's cash rate is at 4.1% as of March 2026, contributing to elevated mortgage repayments and broader cost of living pressures. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australians celebrate Good Friday with religious services, seafood markets, and Easter traditions across the country. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Thousands gathered at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Sydney for Good Friday church services, including the Stations of the Cross. Sydney fish markets saw large crowds buying seafood for Good Friday lunches, with queues forming as early as 5 a.m. The Sydney fish markets opened at 7 a.m. with about 650 tonnes of seafood available for sale over the long weekend. Good Friday services across Australia emphasised themes of hope, renewal, and divine light. The Brisbane to Gladstone yacht race began on Good Friday, with 29 boats participating. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported the Sydney fish market opened at 7 a.m. with staff working since 2 a.m., while Newscomau did not specify the opening time or staff preparations. ABC mentioned the Brisbane to Gladstone yacht race started in dreary, rainy conditions at 11 a.m., but Newscomau did not describe the weather or timing. ABC highlighted the 25-kilometre pilgrimage in Darwin led by Bishop Charles Gauci, while Newscomau did not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.